All right, I'll call to order the
Recording
December
in progress.
12th Public Works Committee. Can I get a roll call?
Chairman Waggy,
Here.
Alderwoman Tice. Here. Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Erker.
Here.
All members present.
All right, go on to approval of the agenda. Any changes? Seeing none, we're approved by acclamation. Any citizen comments?
No one online.
Wonderful. All right, report of the committee chair and alderman. I just have two questions that I asked via email. One was, there was a resident in Ward 2 that put in a request to understand what was happening with the automatic lights of the tunnel. So it looks like it's time-based instead of darkness-based. So with like it getting dark so early, it's about an hour and a half before the lights come on. So I was curious if I can get an update on that.
We're in the process, those things are on. We're working very hard to get that access. At about 5:20.
So you think it's a time base, it's not like a darkness sensor that,
I don't know why it's not.
too early.
So the design of the tunnel is for the lights to be on 24 hours a day.
Oh, really?
And again, I only remember this because I remember talking to the architect about it, is it's actually brighter during the day because you go from sunlight into the tunnel, so they don't want you to adjust as much, and dims at night. And so when we first opened, they were on 24 hours a day. So I don't know how they got switched, to be completely honest. And I'm glad that the resident reached out because we are now efforting to make sure we have access to that properly, so.
So is the end goal here that it will go back to 24 hours and get it back to the way it should be?
At least at night, I think we'll take a look during the day. I've been down in that tunnel plenty of times during the day. I'm
Seems
not
nice.
as concerned about lights being on there, and if I can save a little bit of energy cost, I would
Right.
prefer to do that.
Right.
So, but that's the way it was designed. I think, especially when there's concerns early on about maybe safety, I think that's why the architect did it. I'm not as concerned, especially seeing usage of that and since we've been open.
Okay, will you keep us updated on
Yes.
that? And then the second item was, so right at the high school, on High School and White, there's an old school 50-gallon drum. It looks like, I know we used to recycle 50-gallon drums, and then I thought we got rid of them because they're really heavy and hard to dump into the truck. And ugly, right, because it's like lubricants or something, you know?
Those 55-gallon drums are throughout the city. There's, I think, either 8 or so. We empty them as city trash twice a week. So if they're ever full, you can just notify us. The only decorative one we have, which we received from MoDOT, is over by the Society of the Blind on the south side of Manchester. That one's got a special key, and it's just a Rubbermaid that pulls out. When we considered swapping out materials to something plastic, the problem with that is if it's empty, the wind's just going to blow it out in the street. So it's
Right.
like, the metal ones have holes drilled in them, so it lets the water flow through. And we have a card tipper on truck 3, which is how we typically empty them. Just hook onto it and tilt it in the back and drop it back down.
So
And we
is
use
that-
2 people to do it so that you're not straining yourself.
Is that the long-term plan there? And I think one of the reasons it's full all the time is because there's a lot of traffic there. So like
Yeah,
foot
people walk
traffic,
to school, they just throw
everybody's
it in
right
there.
by school. It's right in front of school. Is that what you recommend continuing with?
At first, I thought just discontinue them. It's like, we'll let you keep your trash on you and put it in the school. But then I'm like,
Oh.
well, it's probably going to go over everyone's lawn. There's no harm in us doing it. We do the dumpsters here and the dumpsters at the rec center. And, we've got specialized routes throughout the week that we do. So yeah, we can put another one somewhere else. It's like, I guess one of them's like a favorite because the other one closer to the high school, that one doesn't get nearly as full. I question whether the people that live there don't just use it when they don't want to use their own trash receptacle.
That's kind of what it looks like, because there's a bunch of stuff in there that no kid is like carrying in the school, like furniture and stuff, like going
Right.
into it. What about like, we've got this nice like laser cut, like trash cans on the, pass, they look fantastic. What about getting one of those there?
I think those were
They were a
like
couple grand.
1,000 or so.
They were a couple grand. They're nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew we didn't have it in our budget before. It's like the drums are actually refurbished. It's like there's steel drums, nothing wrong with them. They blast them clean, they prime them and paint them. You can get them in like blue and green and different colors. And I can get a pallet of 8 for less than one of those decorative ones.
Sorry, Todd. It should be consistent, you know,
Yeah.
we talk about branding and how everything looks the same. Eric, do you know what the cost is if we wanted to invest in something that matches everything else? And then we can just find the money and put multiple out. I don't know that we can stop the residents from,
No, but at least
Yeah.
then it's a smaller opening, so like.
They make
can't-
decorative like frames and you can put the can in there. I considered that too, because then you could lock the frame and only what fits through the opening will fit
Right.
through the opening.
Right.
So if you're trying to cram your kid's car seat that's expired, it's not gonna work. Can't stop you from putting it alongside, but
Right. I don't know. Any thoughts from,
Well, so I certainly, just as a dog walker, there are very few trash cans in Ward 1. So, as opposed to other wards in our city where there are lots and lots of them, so I certainly would not recommend taking it away. And I do think that that decorative kind with the lid would prevent like a week's worth of, or, you know, like a whole kitchen trash bag full of trash from going in there, because there are often multiples of those. I notice, certainly in the one at the corner of High School and White.
yeah, if I remember correctly, it was like $2,000, because I remember complaining about the cost of these trash cans, but they are quite nice, and now I understand. I don't know, what's the committee think? I mean, I feel like these old 50-gallon, it just like, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having separated, but at the same time, I think the practicality is
Yeah.
we're gonna get intermingled stuff, and it's all gonna go to to the landfill. So,
What about putting a nicer trash can?
a nicer trash can with a restricted opening, because, the people shouldn't be putting a kitchen bag full of trash in there. It's not what it's for.
Yeah, I mean, I saw baby gates next to it, you know, it was kind of crazy. Was there?
And is there a different, is there a different place to put it to make it less desirable functional for what dog walkers and kids that maybe have trash coming in and out of school, but less desirable for a homeowner to trek out there and put a large trash bag in there?
yeah, I think just going with a, lockable frame, that's like what the
Yeah.
one is over by Society of the Blind. It's like it takes a key, you open it, door opens up, and you pull the Rubbermaid, whatever that is, that's like a 35-gallon or something smaller. And then we just empty it, put it back in there, lock it, but, you can't lift that lid because it's connected to the frame. It only fits, I don't know, maybe 6-inch. Like if you had an Arby's bag, you could cram that in there, but,
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's trash always on Manchester. There's one of those drums is over at Porter as well. I was thinking like near the bus stop, just so people don't just litter. I know there's stuff that's cheaper. We get catalogs all the time, and we could keep it consistent. But I don't think we want to do the fancier laser stuff for Public Works. It can just be plain but steel and powder coated aluminum, something tasteful, but.
So do you need a motion to come back to this committee with a
I can bring back,
recommendation?
like-
Or is it within your,
I think it's rather simple. If the
Yeah.
direction is to buy a better trash receptacle that matches what we have along the trails, they just need to find the money in the budget to do it, and I'm sure there's sufficient money, whether it's Parks budget or capital or Public Works. I think if that's the direction, that's the
I mean, I
direction.
think it would be worth the nice laser cut ones. I mean, they've really grown on me. They're quite nice, honestly. And this is a corner that's high traffic. We have
Yeah.
hundreds of residents walking past this corner, and right now we have a, lubricant 55-gallon drum
Right.
that they're throwing trash in.
I look at the laser cut and I'm like, 2 of those equals 1 speed cushion.
Yeah.
So,
exactly?
But if it's a nicer one, I don't know, I mean, like, I don't know, whatever the motion is. Do we want to do it
We
just
have
in
a-
this one location, or are we going to do it for the 8 55-gallon drums that are still floating around town?
That would be a bigger motion, wouldn't it?
That's a bigger motion.
So that's 3,000 times 8?
right.
Have money for that? If you were to split it between each department in your 24 budget? Savings?
So I'll make a motion to replace the one trash can at the corner of White and High School with with an attractive trash can with a lid that is similar to the Parks Department trash cans. And then we can evaluate how that's working and see if we want to change all of them in a future budget.
Second that if that's needs a motion.
Want to try one, we have one of the laser cuts that say City of Brentwood downstairs by the library. I don't know how often that gets used, but you could, if you wanted to just see how that worked in a different location, you can move that one over now, see how that works for a while, and then come back in a couple months to have a conversation.
I would say we leave it to you and to figure it out, honestly. Whatever you think is best.
Yeah.
All right, I heard do we even need a motion for this?
No.
Okay, all right. All right, that's all I had. Nancy?
No report.
Jeff?
The only thing that I had is one, or actually, there's two things. One, thank you to the compliance folks who kept communication open to get the nice old wall that's deteriorating at Manchester and Hanley to come down. I think that's much needed and overdue. So two, I had a question on the debris cleanup that we have in the park along the trail that tends to collect debris at Public Works, next to the Public Works building in the gravel there. Is that picked up? There's pallets and other things that kind of pile up. Is that picked up regularly, or do we need to do something different with that?
Yeah, I think the question that, I stand really far back. One of the things we talked about is whether or not the fire department wants to use it, and they were looking into that. If they don't want to use it, then we'll take it we'll put it in our yard waste dumpsters and things, get rid of it. Ultimately, we wait till it collects a little bit. We obviously, after that last flood, we had a lot, so it's time to kind of remove all of that and get it replaced, so.
It's just very visible from the
Yep.
street. So
Yep.
I think if we are stockpiling it somewhere, I think it needs to be done where it isn't.
And typically, to be honest, it wouldn't take us as long, but with the flood going into the holiday party, we wanted to make sure the park was ready to go. So we do have time now to make sure that happens. And there was some talk about the fire department maybe wanting it for a bonfire type training. If that's the case, great. If not, we'll get it into yard dumpsters and get it removed.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Jeff? Nope. Sullivan?
No report.
Okay. We'll move into department and commission reports. So Public Works is up.
I have various project updates here. So kicking off the main one here, Russell Deer Creek Connector. I don't know if anybody's driven through there, but the signals are actually working. So the signals at the railroad, I haven't seen a train go through. Usually it's in the morning, but I know that the traffic signals do work. So that was tested yesterday. Everything's operational. The county still needs to do their punch list. There's some painting and some other pavement markings we need to do, but it needs to be warm enough to do it. But for all intents and purposes, it doesn't affect traffic or pedestrians in the area. So that's a good thing.
Greg reminds me that it has taken 7 years to get this up and running.
Yeah.
So kudos.
He said MoDOT tried for 12 and didn't get it done, and took us 7 and got it done.
And that represents the end of Brentwood Bound.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because
Climatic.
for Monday, we'll have a change order with Gershenson to balance quantities. So you'll see that on the 16th. The slope revisions at 8829, we did do the 6-inch wall. We still never heard about whether the 12-inch was acceptable or not. So I said, just leave it. If we have to do it later, we'll figure out how to do it. We could always pay Gershenson separately so we can close the contract out. FEMA capital projects, the roof replacement work started this week, so they removed that wooden gazebo up on the 3rd floor of the rooftop. Used to be used by the fire department when they were still here, so all of that's removed. Frederick Roofing will come in next week. Hopefully it's not raining both days. They were talking about starting Monday. If it's raining Monday, then they start Tuesday. But what they'll start doing is removing the shingles on the library roof. They said that they wanted to work in one direction, so they'll start on the Eulalie side and push their way, northwardly. And they're going to focus on doing the FEMA work first, so that then we can close that out. And then, that deadline's in February 8th of 25, so we want to make sure we get that all done. So we'll be posting updates throughout the week as they get further and further along. They're going to be doing some Saturday work as well, just so that, you won't hear pounding and sawing and everything else, whatever they need to do on whatever particular section of roof. So it'll take them through the month of January. The goal is to be done before the end of January, or at the end of January. Switching topics, 2818 Breckenridge Industrial. The only thing we have, which we'll just do internally, is that flooding that we had in November, it washed away some of the grassy areas. So we just figure we do it with Public Works folks, rake it, smooth it out, and then put more grass seed. If we put grass seed now, nothing's gonna happen to it. It's just gonna sit there. So we figure we'll just do that, so we can close that project out. Stormwater bid package 1, I talked to Tony Schenk at Gonzalez. He said that there's 2 of the 6 packages that have easement questions or concerns. MSD can't find easements to their facilities where we were planning on making connections. So they're doing more research. I said, well, figure out if they got it, fine. If they don't, then let's at least do 4 out of the 6 so we can get those done. I wouldn't want these 2 to keep slowing us down.
Is one of the ones that doesn't have the easement 2217?
I don't know, but I'll find out.
What the,
Yeah, because you said everything is with MSD. They got the right-of-way limits shown on the plans the way MSD wanted it. And then where they show the connections, they're like, oh, you didn't list the easement. Like, they said, well, no, we did a title search and we can't find the recorded easement with the deed book and page. Maybe you have it. So that's what they're looking for. Because I'm like, well, maybe they did execute an easement, but it never went from MSD's headquarters to the recorder of deeds.
well, if you could update us maybe in the, either by email or in the Friday.
I can put in a weekly
the weekly
report if I figure
report,
out.
that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Missouri American, I'm sure you're aware of areas of your neighborhoods where they're still doing work, service line work. I know they cut holes in Rosalie. It's like, until they're done with these service lines, I don't want to tackle any roads because it's like, especially asphalt. If it's asphalt, you're going to have all these cuts. I would not mill and overlay anything. It's not in my budget for next year anyhow to do mill and overlay. We're focused on Rose Avenue Bridge. But I know EPA read the rules or the program and it said they have till 2034 to complete lead service line transfers to either PVC or copper. So it'll be a while because it said that there were over 9 million lead services identified in the United States, which seems low, but
It shocks me the lack of coordination amongst the utilities. Not your fault in any way, but like
Right.
we put down a perfectly good road and like the next week somebody comes and chops it up again. Like,
Right.
it's unbelievable to me.
yeah, because a resident called me on Rosalie. It's like, oh, what's Bomarito doing here? It's like, I don't know. They're not doing work for
Right.
me. And then when we check with planning and everybody else, it's like, well, they're doing service line work, but they should have come in to
And they,
discuss it.
they put a new gas line in on like Bridgeport like the week after we finished it or whatever. It's like insane.
Yeah, Brentwood Place, Bridgeport, like east of Brentwood Boulevard, all those had service line work. And it's different contractors. It's either Luth or Bomarito, So,
Well, your tax dollars at work.
yeah, and I did get a punch list today from Missouri American. They want to walk the area, like Mary, Covington, all those areas to see if there's, I did see issues like with Mary where there's still curb missing they hadn't put back. So that'll be on the punch list. 2832 Manderley, I just mentioned that because that was in previous, since we didn't have a meeting last month, I just put that in there because it was discussed before, but it's in the 2025 budget. So the goal is to work over the winter and develop an RFP of sorts with design build. I know I'd gotten a second quote. The second quote was about half what the first one was. So we were looking at like 50,000, and if I can bid it and get sealed bids, hopefully it's even lower than that. And then lastly, the street sweeper, that hydraulic cylinder that was leaking hydraulic fluid was fixed, and we started using it again this week. My goal is to develop some sort of information from the different operators and then figure out if we need to change the listing of the streets that we have posted. Because I really only want to do what can be done, not try to push it too far and then something doesn't get done and you thought you were going to be a Tuesday and you wind up being a Wednesday. So just do what you can consistently do. And if it means we have to redistribute it, we do.
Yeah, I personally think we were sweeping too much, too.
Exactly. I said, we're not doing anything if there's salt or bad weather because it's going to tear up the inside of the hopper. It's like, we'll just wait. But right now we're still catching up with all the leaves since those heavy rains in November knocked everything down.
All right, any questions? Yeah, Nancy.
So I have a question. Do you have any information from MSD on the CSO Mary project and timing and?
We haven't in some time, not.
Okay, that's,
a
I hadn't
month.
heard anything in some time, so I just didn't know if you had. I hadn't caught
I
it.
can send an email and ask, because I know they had like at least a year or more of easement acquisitions, and if they're not knocking on doors and getting them, it might push the whole time frame back.
Thank you.
Yep.
We did have a resident who, in the last storm, has had some sewer backups, and MSD had said that they weren't covering it anymore, even though it's a problem with it being combined. So I think the sooner we hear more about that, the better, and, it's something that hopefully she can appeal and get addressed.
Again, we did have one on Lewis that came in today that she said that MSD was going to put a check valve in.
Yeah,
they've
it must have
lived
been,
there.
it probably, I think that's where it was, yeah.
Yeah, they're like maybe the second home north of Manchester.
So
And I
they
said-
are gonna put a check valve in?
Yep.
Okay, good. That's a temporary fix, but it hopefully will help save her from having backups. The bid packages, we've already expended quite a bit of money on designing these projects that we don't know easements, whether we have the easements for, correct?
Right. Yeah, because these are all part of that OMCI funds. So whenever we're done with them, we already filled out an application for each of these 6. And as they're completed, you submit the completed form back to MSD and then they'll release your money. So that's why I was like, well, I want to at least get 4 of them done because then I can get my money right back.
Yeah, but I thought, but you were considering also just moving to other projects?
We could down the
Additional-
list,
I would not recommend
I
that.
don't think
I think
so.
there's time. We
Okay.
need to pursue the easement. I don't see that as
I'd
a
like to keep the 6
possibility.
together as best as I
Right.
can.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear, because I would hate to lose the money that we've already
Yes.
spent on
Yeah.
design.
Right.
On those 2 that we need to figure out easements on.
Yeah,
Okay.
now's the time to figure it out during the winter, because I thought, well, if we can figure that out, you could still bid it in, say, January, February and start.
And we can also
Yeah.
work with our attorneys to try to do some research on the easement to
Okay.
kind of expedite that. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that tomorrow.
They said if all else fails, that MSD would approach the property owner and just issue a new easement. That way, they've had facilities, they can prove historically, they've had them decades. It's like, you never objected to it before. Here's the paperwork. Let's get this documented for sure. So there's a workaround.
All right, any other questions for Dan? All right, thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Go on the Parks and Rec.
So to start, I am going to yield some of my time to Ken, who is the Business Development Manager from Ameren, for Fleet Electrification for Ameren. We had completed the EV Fleet Insights Report, and so we've been asked to bring it here. I thought we had, so I apologize that we had not, but Ken is here. He'll go through kind of a basic run through the report, and then will answer questions that we have. So I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you. Yep, so Ken Crespin, Amber, Missouri. I work on electric vehicles, okay? So market development for electric vehicles. We're trying to inform our community on what EVs mean and then help organizations be successful with their deployments. That's the goal. So this report is sponsored by us. It's compiled by a third party by the name of EIQ Mobility, which is part of NextEra. And we did this, I guess it was completed in March of this year, okay? So, some of this material is time sensitive, but it can be updated as time goes by. The math stacks, okay? It's pretty simple. Also, because no one has fond memories of working on their EV in their garage, right? It's new to everybody. If you have any questions about EVs in general, I'd be happy to take them as well, okay? So I'll grind through this, but please, anything you want to ask, I'm here for you, okay? So this is a report that we've done for a number of different municipalities and organizations. We haven't done it for everybody. Obviously, we don't have enough budget to do it for everybody. But our goal is to find organizations that are well-suited for electrification. I don't think anybody would be surprised if I said that, EV range is a concern for a lot of people. And so, we kind of look for communities that fit within a range operation. The other core thing, I think, before we go through this, is that the way EV deployments work is the EV charges at your electricity cost, which is typically well below $1 per gallon equivalent, okay? So a bunch of the savings happens over time as the vehicle is operated, and it comes in the form of fuel savings. So you'll see that in a cost stack up here. So, and I want to be conscientious of everybody's time. The other thing we did is when we ran this report, we had a choice, right? We could focus on only the vehicles that are economically viable today, or we could focus on the whole fleet and figure out, what the cost adder is using vehicle prices at today's time. And then as vehicle prices drop, you effectively, can adjust the math to figure. So the decision was made to cast a wide net and look at what it is. So when you see a negative number, that's why. By and large, today, most of your passenger vehicles, are going to make sense financially. The vast majority of your commercial vehicles, your medium-duty, heavy-duty vehicles, do not make sense financially unless you're in the sweet spot of miles. Like if you're a transit agency, that makes sense. Is it okay? I'm speaking with a broad brush, but I just, it helps with digesting this. So when when we look through, I'm gonna jump to the graphics. There's an executive summary at the top that I would encourage you to look at. But so the report analyzed 31 vehicles across 6 locations, okay? And it breaks them into vehicle types: utility truck, shuttle bus, refuse truck, dump truck, passenger truck, SUV, and passenger cars. It also looks at operational hours by vehicle and daily distance traveled by vehicle. And it's that type of information that we use to determine whether or not it's technically viable to electrify, okay? So then, out of the vehicles that were looked at, 21 of the 31 vehicles are feasible, and they have a feasible EV model today, all right? So that's kind of a key finding. It's not an EV everywhere. It's only an EV where it makes sense. Also, does Brentwood have a emissions reduction goal?
We do not.
Okay. All right. So some organizations do. So we provide the CO2 savings associated with deployment. And then, this graphic shows the net lifetime TCO, total cost of ownership by location. And the reason why we do it by depot, not just in total fleet, is because these are oftentimes a depot decision, right? They require chargers to be deployed. And then on that note, in this report is an approximation of charger installation, but it is not an approximation of total civil engineering cost. It's really just the wires and the charger itself. There will be, ancillary civil engineering costs, and those can vary widely depending on the specific layout of each location. The way we like to think about it is we try to capture everything that's related to the EV itself, but if you're doing civil work, that's much like paving a road or putting a roof on, that will long outlast this first wave of EVs. Does that make sense? It's an asset improvement. So this kind of slide kind of summarizes the vast majority of the information that's contained in here. So what you see here is two cost stacks. One on the left is for the EVs, one on the right is for the ICE vehicles. ICE is internal combustion engine. Sorry, we've got all kinds of acronyms, right? So what I would call your attention to is that the fuel number at the very top reflects what I started with is in a general description. So the EV operational cost, this is over a 10-year period. If the whole fleet or the 21 vehicles was electrified, it'd be $152,000, $153,000 in fuel. The internal combustion engine or the fuel cost is estimated to be $437,000. So there's your savings. The counter to that, it's not too hard to spot out, is to pick up, is the vehicle CapEx, right? So the CapEx is 1.8 million versus 1.1 million, right? So you spend money on CapEx, you save money in fuel, you also save money in maintenance. In this particular slide, I'm trying to find where there it is. So it's
Real quick, I have
129
a
versus
question.
195, yep.
I have a question related to these calculations.
Shoot.
This is all based on keeping the car for 10 years. How many vehicles in our fleet have we ever kept for 10 years? Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's common. I talked to a number of different municipalities around Missouri. It's common for their fleet vehicles to actually stay in existence for quite a while because they keep them running. And then it's also common for police vehicles to be traded out somewhere around the 4-year mark. And an important note on that is the reason why the police vehicles are traded out more often is because they idle, and they idle a lot. And idling is not good for an internal combustion engine. So the fleet managers for police departments have learned over the years that if they trade them out at 4 years, they avoid major maintenance costs. That's why they trade them out at 4 years. If an organization makes a shift to an EV, you no longer have to buy a new car because of the excessive wear associated with idling. So police department fleet's a little bit different, and we've done police department studies separately from municipal fleets, and have kind of found that there's a nuance there where the trade-off is the calculation is different because on the one hand, they have to account for the fact that they're buying a new vehicle every 4 years, whereas if they had an EV, it might last a whole lot longer. So I think everybody's okay with the overall cost stack. So just to recap, more CapEx, which is oftentimes for municipalities funded out of one pocket, a reduction in fuel, which is typically comes out of your operational budget, and a reduction in maintenance, which again comes out of your operational budget. And that distinction also is very important to a lot of the municipalities I speak with because their capital is funded one way and their operational expenses are another way. Some fleet managers have identified this as an opportunity to reduce their operational expense and then use that money for people. Any further questions? All right. Yep.
Eric.
Yeah, so depot charging design is another layer of thought that goes into this. This report is based around almost a worst-case scenario, one charger, one vehicle, okay? Because we don't know what you're going to deploy and when you're not going to deploy, and each vehicle is assessed on its own, and then the stack-up is laid out from there. There is a cost sharing, or what I would call a value stack of EV charging, right? So cars don't sit all day long, right? Well, actually, they do sit quite a bit of the day, but they don't sit in the same place, they move around. So you can, in effect, use more than one vehicle per charger if you schedule appropriately. And if you can't do that, it's okay to have one vehicle per charger. Similarly, there's different charger speeds. There's what's called the fast charger, there's slow charger, there's levels within levels. I could spend a whole lot of time talking about why right sizing is the thing to think about. But if you go to a faster charger, you can then run different vehicles on different shifts a whole lot faster. So there's a right sizing or a site optimization. Part of that is how much power availability you have from the utility. Part of that is how much power you need and how fast you need it. And it's that last part that's different with EVs. When you go home at night, you park your car, it sits there all night long. That is an opportunity to bring energy to the car without having to bring in the car to a fuel. And so for some fleets, if they're not hot seating and they're not running 24 hours a day, you know, they can park them, and you can actually daisy chain or connect the chargers, so one kicks on, then the other kicks on, then the other kicks on, and it maximizes your energy delivery overnight without necessarily driving up a high cost of a utility upgrade. So there's all kinds of nuances here that we can optimize, but this is built around a worst-case scenario. So, you know, I can kind of drill in a little bit further. You know, I think there's, at the bottom here, yeah, there's specific vehicles that are called out, and these are the recommended vehicles. And I think if you look here, a lot of this is the F-150 Lightning. You know, I'll have to, I can't remember because it's been a while. The F-150 Lightning prices have dropped since we ran this report. So, you know, I think we could look at the replacement MSRP that's in there, and you might find additional savings. But in general, you were running a number of F-250s and F-350s. You know, towing capacity of an F-150 Lightning is actually quite good. But the bed itself is a little bit smaller, so you know, specific use matters. But in this scenario, if you look through, you know, the vehicle IDs are listed, you'll see the lifetime savings. You know, the top one is an F-250 replaced with a Ram 1500 Rev, and the lifetime savings are projected to be $43,000. The next one below it is 12, the next one's 11, and so on. So you can see how those stack up, and you can pick and choose. You know, you don't have to go all in, but what we do encourage people to do is begin with the end in mind, and that's why this report is structured around depots. So you start your depot electrification journey knowing where the net energy potential could be, and then you walk your charger plan through based off of what your needs are.
Does the lifetime savings, is there a break-even point that's factored in here? Because, you know, when we talk about the capital expenditures for one vehicle versus an ICE, there was a rough estimate of $25,000 to $30,000 more than the cost of an ICE vehicle for one of these trucks. Is that differential captured, and then this lifetime savings is on top of that?
Yeah.
Or are we looking at,
So there's a payback period somewhere within the 10 years, and then the savings accrue the longer the vehicle runs. The payback will be faster on a vehicle that drives more miles, and the payback will be slower on a vehicle that drives less. And so this report is vehicle by vehicle, use by use, mile by mile. And that's why some of them, you know, they're the same vehicle replaced with the same vehicle, but you know, one of them, you know, the bottom of this list is for 8,000, and then the highest savings is you know, 12,500. So that range is literally because of the number of miles that vehicle accrues versus the other one. The payback period varies. I've seen them as low as 4 years. Usually it's safe
Around
mark
8.
about 5, 6, 7, yeah.
And I think that's, you know, we're talking operations, we're talking about lifetime savings of costs, and I think that's the better conversation as it relates to using taxpayer money in a small municipality like this for this over time, than the whole debate about sustainability and whether or not lithium mining and cobalt mining, if that's a sustainable thing for long term. I think, you know, we'll see dramatic shifts in this technology. The battery EVs may end up shifting to a different, more sustainable fuel source over time. So I guess the question is, when we start to invest a lot of infrastructure money based on a 10-plus year return, what happens if in 10 years, green hydrogen starts really taking off, especially for heavy-duty traffic and hauling and things like that?
Yeah, so when hydrogen takes off,
I hope so.
it will be much more expensive. I've been a fan of the hydrogen market for quite a long time. The net efficiencies, and actually I'll jump to hydrogen, but before I do, on this screen is the net efficiencies of an EV. And the electric vehicles are very efficient because the only energy they use is the energy they needed, okay? And so whenever you have a phase change or whenever you're changing from a material to a directional force, there's losses, and there's a lot of losses. So when we look at an internal combustion engine, their net efficiency is about 16 to 25%. An EV is 87 to 91%, okay? A big part of that is there's a loop here where it says recovered via regenerative braking, 22% at the end of the blue arrow. That means that when the vehicle slows down, it recaptures that energy. The motor becomes a generator and puts it back into the battery. And so the transfer of electrons from a battery to a motor and then back again is actually quite efficient. So that's why EVs stand out. Without recuperative braking, you could reduce everything by 22%. They're still better, but they're not jaw-droppingly better, okay? When we go to hydrogen, and I've got it at the bottom because I get asked about it a lot.
Yeah, and I know Toyota, BMW, all of
Yep.
them have looked at the replaceable canisters of hydrogen.
Yep.
And recently unveiled some of their innovations there. I see that as the future.
Yep. That's exactly right. So then in order for a hydrogen vehicle to work, the hydrogen has to be made, okay? And that's pretty energy intensive. And then it has to be,
But so is battery production.
well, yeah, but
Water
a
and
battery
energy.
is used over and over again. Hydrogen is a fuel that's used once.
Yeah.
So the net efficiency of a hydrogen car, the energy has to be made, and then it has to be condensed, and then it has to be shipped, and then it has to be distributed, and then it has to be put in the car, and then the car has to take the hydrogen and turn it into electricity, and then the electricity drives it like it's an electric car. So a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is an electric car, and it has a battery in it, and it can drive on pure electricity for a short period of time, whatever that battery is. What the difference is that the hydrogen fuel is a different source that can enable a higher energy density than a battery could get. And so where hydrogen fuel cells make sense is in very long distance travel with no refueling or no recharging and no stops. For the net efficiencies of a battery electric vehicle that are on here, you can kind of see the difference. The overall efficiency of a BEV in this is 70 to 90%. The overall efficiency of a hydrogen car is 25 to 35%. And on top of that, the fuel cost for the hydrogen right now is astronomical. And I think everybody understands that the relative price that you pay for a kilowatt hour is quite low. It's a better value than anything else. So hydrogen has a place, and its place is in a vehicle that needs it. And if your vehicle doesn't need it, it's much more efficient to just run on electrons to begin with than it is to take electrons, turn them into hydrogen, compress it, ship it, distribute it,
Yeah, but over time,
refill it, and turn it back.
that is going to come down in cost, and the efficiency is going to get better eventually because they're making new innovations every day. The problem with the hydrogen was that it had to be contained in a larger container and then fueled at a station. Now, if we're talking about smaller containers being shipped out, it's more accessible like you would have a propane tank at the grocery store. I'm just saying eventually, this is all fairly new. And we are absolutely going to see astronomical changes in the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable to just spitball a little bit here. If you lose 30% producing the hydrogen, and you lose 30% distributing and put it in the car, and then it runs like a battery electric vehicle. If you take those two and cut them in half through innovation, you're still half as efficient as an EV. So the driving decision should be using the energy source that's most cost-effective and works for the vehicle. And it happens over time. And guys, the hydrogen market isn't going to boom in the next 4 or 5 years. It's going to take a considerable amount of time before it reaches any scale. It's going to be a niche market for long distance, long haul that need it, or high energy density. Rail is slowly starting to convert to hydrogen because they got big tanks and they can use that on long hauls where they can't recharge to drive their electric motors. But they're paying for it, and the price per kilogram for hydrogen is astronomical. So coming to this specific area and this specific use, your territory's not that big,
Right.
your miles aren't that long. You can strategically put charging wherever you want. Most people are not going to put in more than 25. I can't remember what the mileage is, but it was like 25 miles a day. The need for hydrogen just won't be there.
Yeah, my original point was that, and Dan even brought it up when we talked about the expensive cost of some of the fancy trash cans. The biggest expense is the initial capital expense, which means it's a bigger hit on our budgets when we do purchase these, which means less money going to roads and other things that taxpayers or residents see a benefit in, whereas an EV infrastructure for city use is not as relatable to taxpayer benefit. So I just wanted to make sure that when we talk about electrification of the fleet, we're keeping in mind the responsibility that we have with managing budgets and making sure that there are other things that we don't put off because we want to do an EV because 8 to 10 years from now, it'll be a savings, right? So those are just the concerns I have with a policy. I think I look forward to testing out some of these things, but I think that we should probably, because of the being driven by taxpayer money, I think we should let the market also, which is still relatively new, see some advances and go a little slower with it. So I'm not opposed to testing certain things. I don't know that we're ready to flip a lot of vehicles at this point.
I think we have the opportunity to save $44,000, and then we are doing a great job of being stewards for our taxpayers.
Man.
And maybe you can figure out electrolysis of hydrogen faster, cheaper, better. But until then, we have an opportunity to save money for Brentwood right here.
In 10 years.
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years.
And I would say it's very conservative, right? This model has been great. The conversations we've had of prices of the cars, where they are right now, it's changed in a year. What the charging infrastructure was necessary, because some of these can be level 120 charge, plug in overnight, cut that cost.
I don't disagree with that.
The model is great, right?
I think
this is very useful information, Ken. And I think
it
it can
is
guide
useful,
decisions.
yes.
I'm not saying go across the board. We got to learn. Like, I believe that there are tons of maintenance cost savings in here. Let's see if that really happens.
Sure.
It can save money. And that's what we're supposed to do, save money. Yeah, Nancy.
Oh, I have a question. So does this take into account maintenance? This does take into account maintenance
It
savings. Or
does, and
staff,
and it's-
or staff time that would be freed up.
So it's based off of, so this is a large database, so it's based off of actual maintenance costs of the vehicles that they have available, right? Versus your maintenance costs. And if you want to think about maintenance, because of that recuperative braking, a lot of the cities that I work with have a lot of stop and go. And especially with refuse, right? Like brake jobs on refuse are a huge thing. You're never using your brakes when you're using recuperative braking, so you don't have to do those brake jobs. So there are, and every municipality puts a different cost on their maintenance structure, And that's your own, variable cost accounting decisions. But these things stack up, and they stack up in beneficial ways that are more than just what's reflected here. Your drivers don't have to go to a specific gas station to buy diesel or gas anymore, because it's ready right there when they start their
absolutely.
shift. All of these things start to stack up, and those are all ancillary benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I really, like, to say that we're not gonna do this because the technology might change. I mean, like, I couldn't reasonably tell a citizen, like, oh yeah, well, we could have saved $43,000, but we didn't choose to do it because we weren't sure about it. I mean, this is a huge savings. And then the other piece about an EV is that they don't get repaired as often, so the trucks aren't down as much. I mean, that you don't go, they're not in for an oil change. They're not, I mean, there's just so much that they aren't out of service like an internal combustion.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that
engine
this
is.
isn't the first model year anymore. They've been running for a while, and I worked in the automotive industry before I came back to St. Louis to work for Ameren. We're beyond the learning curve here. They're genuinely regarded as entering a more mature stage. And then the only thing I make you aware of is there's the federal tax credit, $7,500. And I think we decided to run this without the tax credit, right?
Correct. It's not in
So
there.
all of this is extremely conservative. However, in 2024, the rules were rewritten, and municipalities do qualify for the tax credit. That's $7,500 per vehicle that isn't in here. Similarly, there's a tax credit for charger installation. So that's the good news. The bad news is nobody knows how long that tax credit's going to last. So I feel just, if you're going to do it, I would do it. And you don't have to go gangbusters, but work with whoever your dealer partner is and try to secure that tax credit.
As it relates to maintenance, do the cities that have these, I mean, right now, we do some maintenance internal on ICE vehicles, right? I'm sure that the capability to maintain or work on these vehicles, if something goes wrong, is a specialized thing, right? It's not, you can't just rely on your mechanics
Yeah,
to.
no. So the way I'd categorize it is this: the instances of maintenance issues are extremely low.
Right, understood, but in the event that they do.
However, the technology required to repair something is higher. So when you look at AVs in aggregate, like in large numbers, their maintenance numbers are way lower. But if something does go wrong, the dealer has to work on it. And that's part of a fleet's
And
markup.
was that cost estimated potentially in this?
That's how these things are done, yeah. And so when it comes to maintenance on EVs, each manufacturer is a little bit different. But many of them are going to say that you have to replace a battery fluid that keeps the battery at a happy temperature at like 150,000 miles. Other than that, you had windshield wiper fluid and tires. It's really, they're extremely low maintenance. And I've spoken with many fleet managers. A lot of people are doing this in their fleets. A lot of people are putting their salespeople in them because they don't have to pay them for oil changes anymore, and things like that. So there are known benefits, and I think Jeff, you're right to be cautious. We don't want anybody jumping into the deep end head first, but we want successful deployments, and that's part of the reason we did the study here is because we think you're a really good fit.
So the maintenance we do here is brake work, tire changing, and oil changes. Is there any special training that would be necessary to do that on an EV?
No.
Yeah, Sullivan.
This report highlights the reduction in CO2 emissions. Does that take into account the CO2 emitted by coal plants
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, so our distribution grid is a mix. We have renewables, we have nuclear, we've got gas, and we've got some coal, and it's a mix. So this calculation is based off of the Missouri state average for the grid mix, okay? It gets more nuanced than that. time of day changes, okay? Which means that if you were to charge overnight, you're actually a little bit cleaner than what's in this report because of the way generation works. So there are lots of different options, and that's going to change over time as we add more solar, right? The grid gets cleaner. So this is really kind of a low water mark, and it's intended to be that way, to be conservative. So, some organizations are claiming sustainability credits based off of their expenditures. So this is the backbone for that.
All right, any other questions? Ken? Comments? All right, do we need a motion to accept this or anything?
I believe the city has a goal for CO2 emission do you remember this organization called ICLEI that we participated on in maybe 2013, 14? So maybe none of you were here. So I'm going to want to dig that out and share that information with you because we went through a lot of analysis to come up with that. So, and the people that worked on that are no longer here as well. And that's part of it. So we do have goals that we've set, and I want to share that with you. So I'll dig that up. But, so I think motion accepting the report and direction to staff to start to take a look at this as we develop budgets in the future.
I'll make that motion. That's what Bola just said.
All right, any other comments, questions?
Well, I mean, the only comment that I have is I mean, I appreciate all the effort that you have in there. I appreciate that you got a third party to do that. This is one audit. I think that from a policy standpoint, we probably need to make sure that I just want to make sure I understand how this report relates to policy decisions.
It has to be part of the policy decision-making process. If you remember, Ways and Means has a task for 2025 to start to look at our vehicle replacement policy. So as we start to develop that, we're going to take a look at this and try to incorporate it into it. It's not going to be isolated in terms of what we bring forward as a formal policy document that the board adopts.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's a support for multiple decisions that need to be made as a document to the city, I think it's a valuable document to have. It's not the end-all, be-all, in my opinion, to decisions that need to be made on whether or not we choose to move forward with certain vehicles being electrified or not.
And, just as a reminder, it will probably mirror the same kind of discussion you all had regarding the police vehicle, the traffic enforcement vehicle. It will mirror that exactly. I don't think it's going to be isolated, so you'll get a chance to discuss it even more, policy or not.
Sure.
All right, any other comments, questions? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you, Ken. Appreciate all their work.
Thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Talk to Eric.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, just a couple other things in my report. Obviously, the holiday party was last Saturday. Hopefully, everyone had a good time. We continue to get excited about other things we might be able to do. We really like the wagon ride. That was kind of fun. We added more lights to the park, so as the wagon went a little bit further, you got a little bit more of a festive feel. And we'll try to do different things every year. But hopefully, everyone had a good time. The beer garden RFP. So we talked about this for a while now, and the idea is trying to find maybe someone who might be able to bring in what we call a mobile concessionaire. So whether it's something like a food truck that or a vehicle like a food truck that comes in every day if they want to do that, or if it's something like the shipping container that we've seen Rockwell has. Those are the type of things that we'd be looking for, and really be kind of, as we talked about, a proof of concept. So we do it for a year, see how it works, and move forward. So I put the draft of the RFP in board docs. If there's any questions, great. If not, that's something we'd like to get out in the next couple weeks. And that way we'd be able to move on it before the season. So obviously the RFP doesn't commit us to anything. We'd have to bring that back here with recommendations, and we can make a decision what, yes, we like it, or no, it's not what we want to do at this time. So, I think that was kind of the thought process, is it doesn't hold us to anything.
I've got a couple questions. One back on the holiday party. It was brought to my attention by my daughter who had attended. I'm sorry I wasn't able to because of previous obligations, but she enjoyed it, but felt like none of her friends really knew about it. And if it was a city-wide community thing, would we consider maybe communicating with the school district in advance sometime and let them send a flyer home or something like that to get more maybe community involvement, especially kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the tricky feel of something that, especially after Brentwood Days last year, making sure that we didn't go crazy, especially on the Parks and Recreation social media that has a pretty broad reach as far as demographics and regions and things like that. So, I mean, we did put it out on the city's Facebook page. It did get shared onto the
Community page.
community Facebook page. We put it on Nextdoor, things like that. Yeah, I mean, I think we can easily do something with the school district. They've been great partners. They let us advertise a lot of things, so that's something we can easily do.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger conversation of what's the goal of the event. I mean, I know when we had it at the rec center, it was always kind of a small gathering, but is the goal now that it's moved to the park to maybe get a little bit more attendance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we, as far as the city, we always want the whole community to show up. I mean, that's why we do this. I mean, we provide a party for the residents to kind of thank them for everything they do for the city. And so we never really saw that sort of attendance really at the rec center. It was a very, very specific demographic, I'll leave it at that. And we thought maybe going out to the park would bring out some more families, and it has. And I think that's great. And so, we might be able to hit a different demographic by talking a little bit more with the school. So that's something we can easily do.
Great. I think that may be something to think about for next year. And then I lost my place here. The beer garden RFP, does it designate specific location of where you think it is going to be, or are you keeping it open to it may be anywhere within the?
Yep, keeping it open for a couple of reasons. One is without having exact understanding of what might be recommended, whether it is just a truck versus the shipping container. Secondarily, we have to see what's going on with the flood maps and making sure that happens. If we do anywhere else that's not, I mean, the area that we've talked about in the past for the garden and the stage would need some site work. And so the RFP does talk about if there is minor site work needed, that would be a shared cost between the city and the vendor. So that's in there as well. But the idea is to kind of leave it open so we can have a conversation and really kind of make a determination of where the best place for it would be, especially for this year since it's a one-year thing.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Eric, on the RFP, just minor thing, it does say lighted drone show for Brentwood Days proposal a couple places, so I think there was a copy, please. Just,
Sorry, thought we got all those.
oh, no problem, no problem. And I'll just say, I went to the holiday party, I thought it was great. I mean, Eric, your comments about like we're moving like a demographic with this. It was kind of like, it was a free meal at the rec center back in the day, and it was a different population really than now. And, I think you're seeing it, and I agree. We should reach out as much as we can, but I thought it was another wonderful party. And again, you continue to deliver wonderful weather for these things, so good job.
That's the one job I have every year.
Right.
So that's all that makes me do that.
Yeah, I'll echo that. It was a lovely party, and I just, it'd be nice that more residents would have come, but it was a really nice crowd. So thank you for throwing the party for us.
Problem at all. So next is Brentwood bound cameras. As you guys know, we've had those 4 Brentwood bound cameras for a while. We've renewed it we renewed the cameras last year as we're wrapping up. And really, we kind of see the use of those diminishing. The one that we really typically only really use is the one that goes back across the creek down through phase 1 and phase 2, really to see water events. And so really, When you look at it, it's $17,000 for all 4 cameras. We do own those cameras. I did ask IT, they're self-contained units, so we're not going to be able to kind of put them and integrate them into our system, but they're still looking at things we can do. Really, the cost is to put it on the cloud. And so if that's really the purpose of it, you know, I think that if we really want that view, we could do that through our Vigilon system and just, you know, push it back and we really save the money. We'd only have the cost of purchasing 1 camera versus having those online. And then it would be, you know, it'd just be extra data on our servers. We'd only have a month of that data instead of the lifetime, so we just have to make sure if something does happen to pull that off and keep that and download the video, which is easy enough to do. So personally, my recommendation would be to just work with IT. If we feel like that camera is still important, that's the first question. If we feel like this is important, then to have the Vigilon camera do it instead of paying the $17,000 for the Brentwood bound cameras.
Is your recommendation that it's important? I mean, I used to watch these all the time, and I don't really watch them that much anymore. They're
Yeah,
not available
again, it
anymore.
really comes down to, you know, if you want to see stuff during weather events. Like this last one, you think about what happened, it came up during the night, most of it, so by 8 o'clock, when you actually got daylight, you didn't see much. So that's the one interest, the one thing. You know, I think there's enough of us out there that day taking pictures and video that I think we cover it ourselves. But again, I think if it's one thing that you guys want, it is easy. I think it's easy enough to do with our system.
I don't know, what's the committee think? Kind of the opinion, get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I used to regularly take a look and just see progress of the construction and everything. Do we even have access to it?
No, it's not on the website
publicly
anymore.
Not publicly.
So, I think because we have enough eyes and ears on the ground with where we experience flooding issues, and then people document it. From a documentation standpoint, I don't know that it's worth the spend, unless there was a way to figure out a different way to use them that they do become valuable, like from a safety stance or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and IT will continue to look. I mean, again, we have those cameras, so if we can somehow figure out how to fit them into our system, we will.
Yeah.
But again, I would tend to agree that I think we have enough eyes and ears, and enough of us want to see that in action. When I was up on the overlook on November 5th, I had about 20 people walk up, stand next to me like, isn't this great? It's so cool. And like, it doesn't even hit the, the whole conversation was, but yeah.
And I think a lot of it is our confidence with the flood mitigation, right? I mean, like I used to think it was going to go over, and now it's been fine. So Nancy?
So are there cameras that aren't that are police cameras that are on the playground, or are there for safety or over at the park pavilion?
Yeah,
Okay.
we do have we do have a camera system at the pavilion, the parking lot, and all throughout the playground.
Okay, because to me, at this point, I feel like those cameras are really important, and those are critical for us to have, but to just aim at the path when we all go and take our own pictures is probably not
I don't
necessary.
disagree. So then we'll end that service. The last is this analytic platform. We talked about this a little bit before, how we did a presentation with Placer.ai. They're one of the leading data analytic companies, and they basically take cell phone data and then extrapolate that out for usage and things like that. We met as a management team to talk about things. I mean, when I met with them, it's specifically for the parks and Brentwood Park and things like that. And they showed us a wide range of things, how you could take like the promenade and compare that to Kirkwood Commons and see how things are going. You know, those two, you can kind of do those comparisons. You know, visitation data, attendance, visitor metrics, foot traffic, things like that. Some of that data is stuff that we've gotten from PGAV, but ultimately we have to ask for it, request it, and then, you know, this has a little bit more broad reach and things like that. So as especially in Parks and Recreation Department, we are looking to do things in the next couple of years that would be very helpful to have data-driven. One is we continue, we never stop, but now that we've been, the park is finally slowing down, it's time to kind of get back to some sponsorships. And being able to show the data of people walking through would be an incredibly useful tool to be able to tell people that, hey, you're going to get 2,500 people a week seeing your name on the event. So, I mean, I tell West Community that, and they're like, oh, this is so wonderful. I'm glad we did this. And I give them the data of what we can do. So a lot of it was we've talked those first conversations with a lot of people, and they're interested. And now we can go back with true data of what we're seeing and hopefully be able to kind of capture them a little bit more. So they have offered us a discounted rate if we do it by the end of the year. It would be $17,000 if we do a one-year contract, which is $2,000 savings, and then $15,000 for 1 year and $18,000 for year two. If we do a 2-year, that is would be $3,000 each year would be the savings on that. So we recommend doing it. We just saved $17,000 by not renewing the Brentwood bound cameras. So that is something that I do have in my budget and could handle.
Nancy?
So I was originally skeptical when I read it, and then as you have talked about the potential for having sponsorships and to give people real data of that, I certainly think it would make trying to convince people to sponsor different things throughout the parks system much easier to do. So I definitely support this.
Sounds like a motion.
I would agree. I'll make a motion, yeah, to enter into a 2-year contract with Placer AI for continued data analytics.
Second.
I do have a question, though. So is this, can we expand this out to other parts of the city?
Yes.
So that things like, encouraging businesses to relocate their businesses to us, things like that?
Yeah, there's definitely an economic development aspect to it. You can show people, one of the things I really like is you show how we use the park when people, where they come from the park. Shockingly, number 1 place is the coffee shop right next to it.
Of course.
Number 5 is Starbucks. And then where they go afterwards. And ironically, Texas Roadhouse in Kirkwood's one. So, I mean, there's a possibility to go to them. It's like, hey, you've got 3,000 people a year coming here based on the fact they're coming to the park. How would you like to double or triple that? And that's the kind of things that we'd like to start being able to do.
Great. And then you mentioned that we would typically get this from our consultant, but that would come at a cost as well, right? That what would it usually cost the city to be able to access them?
I couldn't give you the exact number, but when we were going to Vegas to attend the ICSC looking for developers, we worked and we were working on the Brentwood bound, the Manchester Road corridor at the time, so it was incorporated into that.
But it's
So
not cheap to get information.
in the month of September, the mayor asked for this data, and so they provided us with a renewed document at no cost.
Okay, well, that's good.
So we can always ask for it, but then if we get it through this other effort as well, no harm, no foul there.
That's right.
And we have unlimited access, so we can have as many users on here as much, so every department head can have their own account and kind of get to it. The other one I like is it shows traffic data, so you see what roads throughout the city are being driven on the most. So that can look, when we talk about maybe street replacement, Dan can kind of use that data as well with everything else he does. It's just, again,
Data is good.
Data is good.
All right.
Yes, Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. I think it's very beneficial, but when I see wording like we've been offered a discounted rate for contracts, I would just urge you to go back and maybe play a little hardball with them. A lot of the time, I mean, these are highly trained sales professionals. A lot of the time, if you go back and try to negotiate, you can probably get that down a little bit.
Sure.
Just a thought, but either way, I'm supportive.
My best.
All right, any other comments or questions? All those in favor of Jeff's motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, planning and development.
The monthly reports are attached in your project, in the board docs. In November, there were 162 new building permits and 1,203 inspections. That This did not include the 145 properties that were inspected following the November 5th storm flooding event. There were also 27 new code enforcement cases and 48 inspections. We've also been going through some expired permits from previous years that were people never called for the final inspection, so we're calling them to schedule those finals inspections. We also, yeah. The development of the design guidelines for the residential component had the open house on Tuesday. We had 15 to 20 people show up. So, and we are also getting those boards put on our website so people can also submit comments online if they wish to. Last night we had the Planning and Zoning Commission. They reviewed 2 projects: the library site development plan, lot consolidation and rezoning proposal was continued to the January 8th meeting. And Monarch Beauty Collective Day Spa conditional use permit 2001 South Hanley was recommended for approval and will be at the January 6th Board of Aldermen meeting. So, and next week we have our Architectural Review Board to review 2 projects. That is on December 19th.
Great. Any questions for Whitney? Yeah, Jeff?
On the design guidelines, how are people going to be able to make comments? Is there a form submission, or are we just asking people to send to an email address? How are we?
Yeah, right now I haven't delved into that because we
Okay.
just got the boards from the consultant. Right now, we're thinking just an email to staff.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Add some
just,
comments.
let's think that through. I mean, personally, I would encourage people to download it if it's a PDF, make comments using comment function in Acrobat, and then
Yeah.
sending that through an email, but, because I
Well-
don't think we need to go through an expensive infrastructure
Right.
on the website for them to be able to make live comments.
Yeah.
So I just
Okay.
think through how people are going to do that and make sure that it's
Right. I think
clearly
email-
described.
Yeah, so right now we have them all separated out by board, so they can click
Oh,
on
okay.
each board. If it's combined into all one, it was 75 megs, so.
Yeah, no, that's not good. That's not good. So, I mean, maybe that helps things, but
Yeah.
I think just make sure that the direction of how to make comments is clear, or how you're asking for comments,
Yes. Well,
so that people don't get confused and start posting on Facebook or something, and we never see it.
Could I ask what the next steps are for the design guidelines?
So they're gonna take everybody's comments and further refine them, and then we'll come back with another open house to present them. We'll also present them, look at the Architectural Review Board and at the Planning and Zoning Commission. In the meantime, we're also gonna look to schedule the commercial side. This was focused solely on the residential component, so. I'll have a more definitive time frame from our consultant.
So if they're guidelines, if they're just guidelines, do they ever make it to the full board? Or,
It will be adopted as a similar plan.
Okay.
As a subcomponent of planning, as a, like, parks plan and things like that.
okay, so the full board will see.
Yeah,
Because
kind of like the comprehensive plan, yeah.
yeah, because occasionally it takes something that's had a lot of community input getting to the full board level before people like, oh, wow, what is this? So I want to make sure that we have the process in place that it gets to the big board,
Yeah.
just in case. So, thank you.
Any other questions for Whitney? All right, thanks, Whitney.
Well, I have
Oh,
one
sorry.
more suggestion on that. In the time that I was there, I heard the consultant have to say to several people that these are guidelines, these are not dictating what you can and can't build. It's a guidelines of what is acceptable. So I think we need to think about communicating the purpose of this, and that it's not to be restrictive necessarily,
Yeah.
but to help the process be more efficient for people when they come to submit to the ARB. I think the other thing is to future-proof the ARB, because as we know, maybe the ARB makeup might change over time, and we don't want to have one ARB's opinion contrast with another ARB's opinion, and then all of a sudden it's totally different. So those are valuable, I think, reasons why we're doing this, that I think we just need to have a little PR about.
Okay. Yeah,
When
we
it's
can-
posted online, maybe have a, why are we doing this,
Yeah.
and explain those things.
All right, thanks, Whitney. All right, SUSCOM, I don't think we have anything.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Oh, he does have
I think
something.
he does have something.
I'm sorry, I'm just walking up for the next.
Oh,
Yeah, I was
okay.
gonna say. Okay,
After that.
yeah, move on to the consent agenda. We have meeting minutes. I
Motion
got a
to
motion
approve
to
consent-
approve, a second? Anyone? You want to second that motion?
Oh, I did.
Oh, sorry. Second from Nancy. All right, any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, old business.
So Brentwood Days, we talked about this last time about operations and how this year went and different things. And so you guys asked us to do two things specifically. The first was a resident survey, and I kind of gave you the results there. And ultimately, I don't know if anything shocked me, to be completely honest, looking at it. I'm really ecstatic about the 95%, 96% of people who felt safe, because that has always been kind of a questionable feeling sometimes from residents, sometimes from the police department, and we really think what we did this past year worked really, really well. I did like the fact that those who bought the wristbands thought it was a good value, the 63%, and those right around that same 63% rode 10+ rides. So you extrapolate $3 to $5, go to the middle, $4, that's $40. It's more than, or you definitely made some money off your wristband that way. So, and the rest down there, the two that kind of questionable at the end there are the drone. People did like the drone show more than half, but 60% said they'd want fireworks to come back. So that's just kind of the basics. Some comments, I didn't want you guys bog you down with 100 different comments, but most of any of the negative comments were based on the cost of the wristbands. They were free in the past. They should be, we should be free again. They should be much cheaper. I could go to Six Flags for $20. And good or bad, it's difficult. Side note, yesterday I had an MPIR meeting, which is our inclusion rec. So it's 7 cities. 6 of them have carnival rides. I asked every one of their wristbands were $30 to $40. So we are below anywhere else around. So secondarily, I did talk to the carnival ride operator. They've been out of town for a while, so I just got a hold of them last week, and they need some time to kind of talk. But the big thing is that, their thought process and the conversations I had with them is that if we had one of these couple options, and these are the options we kind of floated out there, if we returned to a free event, we'd have to go back to a similar fixed fee that we used to do in the past. Secondarily, if we wanted to say, hey, we should have free wristbands for all residents and then make non-residents pay, their thought process would be a fixed fee because we saw such a dramatic decrease in non-residents this year that we couldn't guarantee enough money that it would be worth it. And then if we do something that we did this year, if we do have wristbands, discounted wristbands, whether they're $5, $20, or whatever we decide to do, and then full price for anyone the day of or for non-residents, they said that they couldn't do what they did last year. They couldn't do the 40,000 minimum for the 13 rides. It would either, one, reduction of rides, so it's a little bit more cost prohibitive for them, or two, increase the minimum, or maybe it's a combination of both. That's the part they're talking about that I really need to find out what that actually would be. I should have that by the January Public Works meeting. But ultimately, as far as what we talked about as far as staff, we do think we should keep that discounted fee similar to 2024, as we talked about in the last meeting. We pulled off the Band-Aid already. So we've kind of done that. If there's a question about whether or not it should be $20, should be $15, that's further discussion we can have in January if we want, or tonight. But just not pressuring. I know we have I need more data from you from the carnival ride people. We did hear a lot of good results from the popularity of the beer garden, so we'd like to keep that. We've already talking about how we maybe situate the whole event differently so that beer garden's closer to the stage and more involved. And because if that's where people want to be, then maybe it's a way to kind of help the bands feel like they're a part of it as well. And we do want to keep doing the drone show, mainly for the sustainable features. You know, the reduction of noise and air pollution, the CO2, all that stuff is good, and I think it is very good. The Sustainability Commission really appreciated that aspect of the drone show, and I think there is ways we can work with operators to kind of talk about some of the things we heard. Music was one of them, maybe a more defined story, and as we've talked about, like anything else today, as drones become more and more popular, that will get better and better. So I'd like to keep doing that as well. So those were the quick recommendations, knowing that we probably need to have a further discussion once I hear back from the Carnival Ride Company.
All right, any comments for, yeah, it sounds like we'll get those quotes and we'll have continued discussion as we go.
Sounds good. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Eric. Okay, we're no new business, so we'll go on the citizen comment.
No one online.
Okay, then this is different than normal, but we do have a closed session in Public Works, so if somebody can make a motion.
So I'll make a motion to go into a closed session for relative to RSMO 610.021 subsection 2 and adjourn therefrom.
Second.
All right, any comments, questions? Do I have to do a roll call or something on that? Yes. Okay, can I get a roll call on that?
Chairman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Erger?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks.